name. But anyway, so Lydia, we're glad you are on board here with us.
Thank you.
We live in the same Southeast Pennsylvania, and I have worked with American Liberty Tours, exploring our legacy of liberty and faith, believing that we have no future without a knowledge of our past. And that really, then when she asked me to moderate this program, this conversation, I went to find out what I could about you beyond just the notes that were sent on the topic for tonight. And I really loved what I found.
Oh, goodness.
So,
okay,
Lydia,
do the download.
all right. This goes back to 2012 and the 225th anniversary of the Constitution. And you put together a wonderful program for 12 months of that year where there was a different forgotten American story each month. And then you have wrapped it up since then, I discovered, in a website and on a book. And I would encourage folks to go to your website, Forgotten American Heroes. Is it .org or .com, Lydia? Have I lost her?
She's gone.
Okay.
She'll be back.
Okay.
This is Judy. I don't know how to get on either. I'm on sound, but I don't know how to get.
Hold on. I think I'm putting you on. Hold on. There you are.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. Hello.
Okay, this is my first time on this side of the IT thing. It's exciting.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you folks about the program that Lydia had because she will know all about it, but you won't. But in 2012, on the 225th anniversary of the Constitution, she put together a program for the community and for the schools, and her website has all the curriculum criteria for state standards in Utah and so forth. And I have it here. Just a moment. Her website is ForgottenAmericanStories.com. And each month of the year, she had a different theme, and it covered Ellis Island, why did people come to America? It covered the Army, the Continental Army, the Revolutionary War, the story of the Pilgrims, the story of the flag. It was just some basic things, but it's laid out very well with curriculum criteria for kindergarten all the way up through 6th grade. Hi, Lydia. I was just telling them about your ForgottenAmericanHeroes.com. I found it out. Yes. And during the time she had that, there were cards available throughout the county and the town, and folks could pick up the story of the month that Lydia had put together. And now she has it into a textbook. Is that still available?
Yes. It is.
Okay.
It is.
Oh, we're going to have a little background music there. Sounds good.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, no, perfect timing.
Okay. So Lydia has been involved for some time. Was it Common Core that initiated your interest and involvement, Lydia?
Actually, it was a friend of mine who was reviewing, her kindergartner was in health in school, public ed. They were teaching them about AIDS prevention. And she, as a concerned mother, went, oh, good grief. Why? Because, we know how it's transmitted, and what are the chances that a kindergartner really needs to know that? So she went to a state board of education meeting here in Utah, and I went with her because, morale support. And one thing led to another. This was in 2011. And I started going to all the state board meetings every month. I just felt drawn, like I really wanted to know, what are my kids going to be learning? And I realized that it's the state education system that really runs your local education system. So if you want to make changes, you've got to go at the state level. So that's what I was interested in doing. And so lo and behold, as I start going to these meetings, that's when I realized it was right before Common Core was starting to get implemented. So I got to see a really good before and after Common Core over that 4-year transition from 2011 to about 2015, 2016. So yeah, that was an interesting journey.
So where did your interest in socialism versus capitalism and free market come into the picture along the way?
Well, I went to public ed myself, and I never learned anything. I didn't know the difference between the Constitution of the United States of America and the Declaration of the United States of America. And I realized that as a grown-up, that if I don't know these things that I felt were important, how do I teach these things to my kids? And what really triggered me was in 2008, the 2008 election, because I was really struggling with, who do I vote for? And I'm a very spiritual person, and I love the Bible, and I know I can rely on it and my pastor for spiritual guidance and spiritual matters. Well, where do I go when it comes to political matters? You know, isn't there a standard or some kind of criteria out there that I can use so I could determine who are good people to vote for and who are good laws to vote for and who aren't? And that's when it dawned on me, wait a minute, there's something called the Constitution of the United States of America. And so I started reading everything I could on the Constitution, on the founders, and oh my gosh, I didn't realize how dehydrated I was for truth until I started reading the actual writings of our founding fathers. I don't think I ever even read a direct quote from any of our founding fathers. It was, you know, that all men are created equal, you know, from the Declaration of Independence. And that was probably the only thing I'd really ever heard. And I remember executive, judicial, legislative. I remember the three executive branches. I didn't know anything else. It's not to say that I didn't learn it, but I don't think I did. Or if I learned it, it was so not applicable to me or whatever, it didn't stick. And so that's when I realized now, you know, enter 10, 20 years down later and I have kids and I'm realizing, you know, if we want freedom to be perpetuated, we have to teach these principles to our kids. Because schools aren't doing it. I checked out every textbook in Morgan County School District here in Utah to find out what are my kids going to be learning in American history, K through 12. And I only found a half a page out of all those textbooks that mentioned anything about the sacrifices the founders made on our behalf, on our kids' behalf, for freedom. That was it. The Constitution was in the back of the book. The Declaration was in the back of the book under the reference section. So tell me, ladies, how many of you, raise your hands, read the reference section? So I realized, well, no wonder why everything is going crazy in our government, in our country back then, and now it's really escalated. It's because we don't know what the rules are. The Constitution are the rules, and the Declaration are the principles that we use to formulate those rules. So if we're not studying our primary source documentation, if it's not being taught to our kids, well, that's the perfect way to lose freedom. Perfect. Just have our kids not learn it, then they don't know these things exist. They don't know how to vote, or they'll vote based on emotion or who's going to give them the most perks and benefits. Well, people, that's called the welfare state. That's called socialism, is when government steps in and says, hey, we'll take care of you, you know, we'll pay for this, we'll give you free education and free medicine and medical health, and we'll give you free housing and food, and well, my dad taught me nothing is free.
True. Somebody's paying for it.
Yeah, you can't give someone a shovel full of something without having dug it out from somewhere else. And so what the government does is as soon as we say, yes, government, why don't you come and help us? Why don't you take care of us? You know, why don't you take care of my mom and dad in their senior years and my, you know, whatever, or ourselves, then they say, okay, sure, we'll do that. And we're going to tax you. We're going to take it out of all your paychecks, those of you that are working. And we're going to have to hire a whole bunch of people now to run this new program that you want us to run so that we can take care of you. And lo and behold, welcome to socialism and the welfare state. And that's what got me started, is when you start reading research documentation and the writings of our founding fathers, and studying what America was like before we declared our independence from Great Britain, you can see the contrast, why they did what they did, so that we don't have to go through what our founding fathers went through.
You know, Lydia, if I could say here at this point, you're right. There were difficulties they had under the British government that were going to increase with the way things were going, but it was not socialism that they were fighting. And you mentioned before about everyone being so uninformed. They're not instructed in the schools about what our country's founding principles were. And I think that is the key to one reason how we got to where we are. I just viewed this afternoon a special report that was just put out, and it said that in a poll by the Barna polls, that 37% of the American people as a whole would say they would prefer socialism to capitalism. And that when you're looking at the millennial students, 75% of them prefer socialism. But this is the problem. They don't really know what socialism or capitalism is. And some of the definitions they had of socialism were, well, socialism is people getting what they need and being able to live with dignity. Or another one answered, socialism is doing what's best in society for everyone, or socialism is caring for people. And they're hearing these kind of things as juxtaposed against capitalism, as though if you're a capitalist, you don't care about people, you don't care about their dignity, you don't want them to have their needs met. It's just irrelevant to you. So would you give us a definition of socialism as we go forward?
So socialism is, to me, the bare bones bottom line is when the government owns your businesses, owns your utilities, owns your press, owns communications, transportation, your medical system, education system. It's when the government controls all that.
Okay, can we go to, there's a gentleman named Leonard Reed. I don't know if you're acquainted with him. He died in 1983, I think it was. I think he was born in 1888. But Leonard Reed, I was listening to a program of his from 1962, and he's talking then about how far along we are down the road to socialism. But socialism is the midway between capitalism and communism, right? Yes. And under socialism, the government owns the means of production and distribution. It's not just the government owning it or being involved, we're there, but they completely control the means of the production and the distribution of the goods and services.
Yes.
We still have private ownership. So socialism, there's no actual private ownership and operating of a business. Under communism, there's not even private ownership of anything.
Right.
So, but you have the question that you have before you, and that is, how do we teach our children this 75% of the millennials and these children who are coming up getting spoon-fed socialism from the classroom? So how do we provide an alternative for their consideration? How do we acquaint them with it?
So I have a unique situation. I'm an ice skater, and my coach is named Karel, Karel, Karel. He's from Slovakia. And I had this dialogue with him 2 weeks ago before my skating lesson. I said, Karel, we have so many young adults, young voters now that are voting for socialism. And he left socialism behind. I said, so what is it that's attracting, in your opinion, our youth to want socialism. So I had him explain to me what life was like for him in Slovakia before he came to America and became a legalized American citizen. He's very proud of that he did it the right way. And he said, Lydia, it's because everything is free there. Free sports, free education, and it's a good education, he said, and your housing and everything, your medical, and it's good, and it lulls people in this. I said, if it's that good, then what is it that made you want to leave that and come to America? And he said, and here's the key, and this is what they don't teach. Because either they don't know themselves. I do believe there are a lot of teachers and professors that have bought into this idea that socialism seems like a utopian society. Everything's common, everything's the same. In fact, Carl said, we're all taxed the same. And I have to tell you, this attracted me to socialism in this aspect. He said, we're all taxed the same amount, 20%. We're all taxed 20%. It doesn't matter how much you make, or what your skin color is, or whatever your whatever is. So everything, the playing field is level, and it seems equal. But he said, Lydia, here's the catch, and this is why I came to America, and this is what our youth need to know. Number one, he said, as soon as you try to climb out of the box, any box, whether it's, I really would like to make more money. Nope, you're capped. There's only so far the people who are leading socialism, and this is what they're not saying either. Someone has to lead and govern, right? Someone has to dictate how in socialism, how your businesses are going to be run, or how much money you're going to make. So there are those that already are above you that are dictating this, okay? They're the ones that determine this. They're the ones that, he said, it's compressed. He said, I felt very compressed. I noticed my hand, just doing this. He said, I felt very compressed. I couldn't do more, even if I wanted to, even if I had the ability. And so that was number one, why he wanted to come to America. And number two, and this was interesting, he said, in America, it doesn't matter where you came from, you can be an American. And he said, but for me, a Slovakian, if I went to Germany to live, I could never be a German.
That's
and he
very
said, very tangible. There's the Germans, he said, you felt less than in Germany if you weren't a German. He said, and that's pretty much all over Europe. That was what he shared. If you're not a Spaniard, and you're living in Spain, you're going to feel less than. And my son lived 2 years in Spain, and he said, you know what, Mom, that's true. There are a lot of people from Africa that are in Spain, and they are looked on as less than. But here in America, Carl said, you can be anything, come from any country, and you can assimilate and be an American. I can't go to Germany and become a German. I can't go to Slovakia and be a Slovakian, but you can be a German and come to America and be an American. And he said, that to me is equality. So that was fascinating to me. Now, I'm not sure if I answered your question totally, but I know I'm getting on something, because those are the things that I said, Carl, this is what you need to teach your children now, is help them see the difference, the contrast. And so then it becomes a choice for our American youth and our young single adults and even our grown-ups is, yes, you can have socialism. You can have the government run all these things. But number one, it will never be equal, like they're saying, because someone has to operate it. Someone has to make the decisions on your behalf for you. How much money you're going to make, or how you're going to run your business, or how much produce you're going to grow, or in Hitler, I have a friend whose mother lived during the time of Hitler in Germany, and he made the farmers, before they released their chickens in the daytime from the coop, that she had to put her finger in the chicken's body to see if there was an egg in the chicken's body, because they weren't allowed to let out the chicken unless the chicken laid the egg, because the government put a quota on how many eggs the chickens had to lay. and see, then it becomes a power thing. People in power have a tendency to abuse it because they want more power. Oh, and here's the other thing that Carl said. The corruption was huge, huge corruption.
People looking for ways around the overregulation.
What's that?
People looking for ways around the overregulation, the unreasonable regulation, and how to have a little bit of what's being taken from them to keep it. I want to go back to what you said about 20%. And I also want to say hello to Dustin. Welcome aboard to the discussion.
Hello.
Hi. And in the scriptures, when Joseph, most of you, I assume, are acquainted with the story of Joseph in Egypt when he was Pharaoh's assistant next to Pharaoh. And there came the famine at the end of the story, and there were 7 years. In the first year, the people of Egypt bought food with money. The second year, they bought it with their cattle. And the third year, they said, we don't have any money. We don't have any money left. If we sell our cattle and our lands to Pharaoh, will he feed us? And so Joseph said, okay, if you sell your cattle and your lands to Pharaoh, then we will feed you for the rest of this famine. But it says he made it a statute forever that because Pharaoh owned their cattle and their land, they had to give him 20% of their increase. So if 20% of their increase, because they were slaves and Pharaoh owned them. So where are we? We're well above 20%. But I don't. What part do you think, Lydia, that an ignorance of our own history, an ignorance of the signal turn in world history and what was accomplished from 1776 on, and what the condition of things in other countries and other forms of government and what has, I dare say most children have no idea coming out of the schools, the number of people who have been sacrificed to achieve this unachievable idea of this socialistic communistic utopia.
It's so true. Think about it. You have Fidel Castro, Cuba. How many of his people did he kill? Or Stalin or Lenin or, yes, Hitler? What's going on in Venezuela right now? There's so much corruption there. I watched a news clip. I don't know if any of you watch Prager University, but I love their little 5-minute clips showing people waiting in line for toilet paper. You know, because the government's become so corrupt, but they sold the people on socialism. We'll take care of you. I don't know what it is with us as Americans. It's like we fought so hard, like you mentioned, to get out of slavery, and yet now we're willfully saying, take care of us. It's like, here are my wrists. Go ahead and shackle me and just feed me. I'll be like a baby bird, and you just drop in the worms. There's something evil going on with that ideology, portraying that as that's good, when the costs are so horrifically high.
There was an American minister, Francis Asbury, who spoke. He was in 1770 through 1825 here in America. And he said the American people, as Christians, will be productive and industrious. That's part of being a Christian. He said, but then that very prosperity, I'm concerned because it will lead to a laxness and the things that come in consequence of that. So here we are in the 20th century. We have had amazing innovation and inventions that have greatly relieved our workload. Life is so easy. You don't have to haul the water, heat it over an open fire. We have convenient heat at the flick of a switch, lights without candles. So, and we have this vast amount of leisure time. And what have we done with it? We have gotten soft and easy. And I'm not for going back to just living in the woods by any means. I'm grateful for the blessings that we have. But how do we impress upon the coming generations that to maintain a free government and to maintain independence requires an investment of effort and self-responsibility, self-government, self-reliant, taking responsibility. How do we get this to them?
I think a lot of it is our own example. You think of those that are on permanent welfare, generational welfare. What kind of example are they setting for their kids? And is it any wonder that it's generational? Well, we can start a generational lifestyle of a good work ethic, and especially teaching our kids at a young age how to work. Because you touched on this, that we've been blessed for so long in America with so much prosperity. What did you give your kids and grandkids for Christmas this year? You know, what do they get for birthdays or whatever? When they want something, do they have to do something to earn it, or do we just give it to them? So we have an entitlement mentality going on here in our society. It's probably worldwide, I am guessing, with those that are in affluent countries especially, that just because you ask for it, you should get it. Rights come with responsibilities. So the entitlement mentality is very destructive too. You know, if we're demanding our rights, then we should be very willing to accept the responsibilities that come with that. We demand the right to be freedom, to have freedom of speech or freedom to worship how we would like. Well, there are responsibilities that come with that. And our examples as parents is paramount. And how we raise our children is paramount. And especially to show them, I think the biggest thing we can do, and this is the key that I found in my life, I've got 2 children. My youngest is 13. My oldest is going to be 23 next month, is to show them the contrast. Help them learn what it's like in countries without freedom. There's plenty out there. There's things that they can read. For instance, I don't know if you've heard of the Red Scarf Girl, but it's an actual account of a girl who was raised in China when Mao Zedong took control over China and took away so many of their rights. And so it's her account as a student, a young girl, of what she witnessed. And it's a true account. So when we read these things with our youth, reading is important to do with our youth anyway, but if we can read accounts of what life is like for many of these people right now, even that don't live in freedom. We think of what's going on in Africa or Syria, or, you know, think of all the refugees coming. We've got a lot of refugees coming into Utah. Just ask them their story. You know, it's like,
and as Dustin has pointed out, Venezuela is a ongoing contemporary example of the great failure of socialism.
Yes.
And it's happened so very quickly. And there are several other countries in South America that illustrate it. You have the EU, which really is a socialistic umbrella over Europe. And the regulations have absolutely devastated the beef market. There was a town in England that used to be the center market in all of Europe for beef cattle, and there's nothing left there now but a single cow in a bronze statue. That's all they have that's left of the market that was there.
That's so sad. So sad. So sad. And so as parents, the more we can teach our kids what's real by contrasting, okay, this is what you have. Now look at this, or let's look at this article, or read this story, or watch this video clip, or, you know, about what's going on in the world in other countries, and compare their form of government. One of the things I did with my daughter when she was 11 years old is I took her to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And we went through there, and when we came out, she said, "Mom, why did you take me there? That was so depressing." And I said, good, because that's exactly what happens if we were to get rid of our form of government, our constitution that protects our rights. For instance, in that case, our right to believe and worship how we would like. Hitler got rid of the Jews.
And others.
And others, yeah,
And others,
a ton
yes.
others, the gypsies,
Yes.
homosexuals, handicapped, he got rid of them all. If he didn't like you, then he got rid of you. Well, here in America, we value life, and life is protected by our United States Constitution. And it's a principle taught in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I was able to, she could feel and see with her own eyes the contrast and value. Gosh, if I don't want to go through that, what the Jews went through, and the gypsies and the homosexuals and the handicapped people, et cetera, the ones that didn't have blonde hair, blue eyes, in Hitler's world, then this is what I'm going to face if we get rid of our form of government, or if we start eroding it, which we already are. If I don't know the rules of government in our country, which is what the Constitution is, it's the rules by which we should all play in order to maintain freedom.
Right.
How is the game of basketball going to go? Nobody knows what the rules are.
It's amazing in the decades that followed our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And there were many upheavals in Europe, but people saw another and a better way to go than they had gone. And no other document of government has been imitated or copied throughout the world in the 200 years that followed, even on through to now, than the U.S. Constitution. But it is one thing to have it on paper, and it's another thing for it to be adhered to by our legislators and upheld in its true essence by our judicial system. And that's two very different things. But sir, I heard a gentleman say today, considering this topic, that the challenge to the conservative is to explain how free markets are more biblical and compassionate to all than the government takeover of everything. And we must be able to clearly articulate both the benefits and the features of what our view of government, our worldview, our view of government, and our view of the structure of society. We are going to have to equip ourselves to be able to articulate this to the younger generation, because with the rise of the Bernie Sanders campaign, socialism has taken a giant leap forward. And it sounds so good, so caring, so compassionate. And they, as we said before, they position it as though if you're not on this bandwagon, then you care nothing about your neighbor. But they need to know by the facts of history, and even in the present time, a utopia at what a price, and you don't ever get there. So, well,
and here's an interesting thing to consider too, is I sadly used to be part of that generation before I call it my own awakening, where I did my, when I realized, oh my gosh, I need to study more what our form of government was created to be instead of what it's become. I need to read what those principles are that freedom is based on. I've lost my train of thought. Darn it, what were we talking about? I hate it when this happens. I was on to something really good.
About bringing the younger generations in to articulate to them the benefits.
Okay, yes. It's choice. Who would you like to choose? Who would you like to be able to choose, or would you like the government, who doesn't even know you, to choose what is best for you for your health care, or what is best for you for your employment, what is best for you and your children for education? Who would you like to have choose for you what kind of house you're going to live in? Carl from Slovakia, my coach, said, Lydia, we all had housing. We all had an apartment. Most of them lived in apartments. The ones that lived in houses were the ones that were over the rest of you, making the decisions about where they felt you should live. So I think if we, well, for me, it's a matter of choice and teaching our youth. Yes, you can have socialism and have all these free things, but but that means you're giving your freedom of choice as to what's best for you to somebody else to choose for you. Is that what you want? You want someone else to choose for you your health care, your housing, what kind of car you drive, how many eggs you're have to lay. Do you want that? And here's the thing. So America, being American, does have its risk. Capitalism, free market economy, free market system does have its risk. And I think that's the part that we need to coach our children, that yes, it has risk, but it also has great rewards.
Yes.
You think of how many people have lost everything in America and then rebuilt it. Ta-da! Because they have that freedom. Now, socialism.
For one.
What's that?
Dave Ramsey, for one.
Okay.
There have been others.
Multiple times.
So, and that's the beauty of America, is what it does to us as Americans. Because of the risk, yes, we may fail, but then what does that do to our character? What does that do to our growth, to our souls? When we have freedom to choose,
it seems that
we
government,
grow.
I mean, if, and my name is not Tyler, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, it's Brooke. But I'm moderating or doing the IT stuff for Tyler tonight. So a couple thoughts come to mind, and I grew up in a business owner family. My ancestors came from Switzerland in the 1700s, at least one side, and started a business, and it's still going today. It's not in my family today, but it's still going. So 1785 it began, and without that opportunity for private property and to have that freedom that we were just talking about, my ancestors could not have given as much as they gave either. So with socialism, we may be provided for by the government instead of a God, right? We're dependent on God in a free market economy rather than depending on the government for provision. And yes, we can succeed or we can fail, and we can also, part of it is is understanding capitalism from there's such a thing as compassionate capitalism, which is capitalism, as Dustin's talking about, can be, the greedy can profit from a capitalistic system and not be philanthropic or care for our neighbor at all. And that is their absolute right as a human being. God doesn't want us to be compulsory givers. He wants us to be cheerful ones.
Right.
So the other downfall of the socialist or communist system of economics is that we can't give as much as we want to be able to give either. So, if we're cultivating a spirit of giving to be a giver rather than just being a taker and a contributor, as opposed to just a taker of any system or a person or any government.
You speak to compassion, and the socialists present their system as if it is more compassionate than a capitalist system. But when a person is able to get a return on their invested labor to reap what they sow, which is an eternal law, you reap what you sow, and you take what you reap, and you then have an extra to give to those who are in need. But if, as so perfectly illustrated, and I'm sure that Lydia brought that out in her story of the Pilgrims, when they changed from communism to every man had his own property, then they had more than they'd ever had before. People work more willingly. There's more abundance to meet the needs of all when you have the free enterprise system. It, in the end, is independent of being the most moral, right? A moral system. It is also ends up with much more available for generosity and for compassion.
Well, it reveals our nature. right?
Yes, right.
So it frankly reveals our need for a savior, because we realize, okay, if I'm, you know, if I am being greedy, or I am blessed with production, you know, some fruit from my labor, you know, and I'm looking around going, you know, I like to be able to pile up all my cars and whatever, but this guy over here doesn't have anything. It reveals my selfish nature, right? It's also, you know, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I actually have on my telephone, if anybody gives me 2 minutes to read these 9 things. This is, if you can see this, it's a little pamphlet that Mac Printing, which is here in Pennsylvania, printed prior to 1954, because that is when President Eisenhower inserted "under God" into our Pledge of Allegiance. And this little pamphlet came with these 9 rules to communist revolution that were given out in May of 1919 in Dusseldorf, Germany. Mac Printing, it says, Mac Printing believes the facts presented below are critically important to the immediate and future well-being of you, your family, your friends, and your country. In May of 1919 at Dusseldorf, Germany, the Allied forces obtained a copy of some of the communist rules for revolution. While there is question as to the authenticity of these rules, we feel that they aptly apply to present-day conditions. So sometime between 1919 and 1954 is when this was printed. As you read, stop after each item and think about the present-day situation where we live and all around our nation. A, corrupt the youth, get them interested in sex, make them superficial, destroy their ruggedness. B, get control of all means of publicity, thereby get people's minds off their government by focusing their attention on athletics, sexy books, and plays and other trivialities.
Check on the first 2.
C, divide the people into hostile groups by constantly harping on controversial matters of no importance.
Yes.
D, destroy the people's faith in their natural leaders by holding them up to contempt and ridicule. E, always preach true democracy, but seize power as fast and as ruthlessly as possible. F, by encouraging government extravagance, destroy its credit, produce fear of inflation with rising prices and general discontent. 3 more. G, promote unnecessary strikes in vital industries, encourage civil disorders, and foster a lenient and soft attitude on the part of the government towards such disorders. H, by specious argument, cause breakdown of the moral virtues, honesty, sobriety, continence, faith in the pledged word. And I, cause the registration of all firearms on some pretext with a view to confiscating them and leaving the population helpless. So, are we there or are we not there?
It was quite something today to listen to an old tape that I pulled out just for review of Leonard Read called The Essence of Americanism. And he was saying in 1962 about the great concern about how far we were down the road, as I said earlier, at that point, and can we right the ship? And he's made this comment: one of the reasons socialism makes so much gain is because of the ignorance of the philosophy of free market, private property, and limited government philosophy. And so without that getting out into the marketplace of ideas somehow, and I had a friend who's no longer living, but he was a gentleman that I very much valued our conversations. Most of them were by phone. He had moved out to California. He was an older man, a friend of ours. And he encouraged people. He said, the Christ model, just as to try to find 12 people that you can teach and instruct in the free market, private property, our history, limited government, and encourage each of them to have a small, you can't do a large number of folks individually, but you can influence a smaller number of people, one-to-one. And then as far as being a part of our community, it seems that so much has withdrawn to behind a screen that we have very little face-to-face. And one of our sons pointed out, we need to find a way to meet other people who care about this country and what's going on face-to-face. This is sort of an in-between, I suppose. But there is something to say for being in the same room, sitting down at the same table when you have a chance with people of like mind, or even with people that we want to talk with, because how can we ever gain our neighbors to consider a different viewpoint if we don't have an opportunity to sit down and talk with them?
Well, and I think it's promoting, again, I think it's a Reformation mentality. So we are looking to, we have to be able to connect with all generations, because the millennials and the Gen Zs, they need the Xers like I am, and they need the baby boomers and whoever was before the boomers, right? The World War II generation. And we need to connect with them in as many ways as possible. So if there's 7 of us here today, if we put on our calendars over the next 12 months, even 12 business networking events, 12 church services, 12 webinars, 12 meetings for, at local universities for, like, tomorrow night, my kids and I are going to the American Revolution roundtable at Lafayette College. So in there are 25 people in there. So we can say, okay, we have conversations on the culture starting. We have trainings from Americans for Prosperity starting in the Lehigh Valley. We have Republicans and Democrats sitting down in small groups and listening to one another, just listening, not trying to convert, simply communicate.
There was a young man I met this past summer who moved into a neighboring township, and his purpose and goal is to revive neighborhood events, because the front porch is gone. And so he has been organizing local events and get-togethers, whether it's a barbecue or a music get-together, just to start building small group acquaintance with one another in the neighborhood, and through things like that, perhaps. Lydia, what about you? Do you have some ideas to put in here? Or
I like what Robin said. Honestly, I've boiled it down to what Robin said to, no, Robin, Brooke. Sorry, yes. Brooke.
Okay.
How do I get Robin? Is there a Robin somewhere? No, I'm not. Anyway, maybe you just look like a Robin. I don't know. Sorry, Brooke. Anyway, it really is a choice between God or government, isn't it?
True.
We replace God with government, or we choose God over government. And so,
just a minute. I just want to remind us that government has its role. It has a constitutional role, and it has a divinely appointed role. But when it's overreached to remove from us our individual responsibility.
And to remove God and to pretend like they're the ones that, if you think of the whole story of Pharaoh and Moses and the Israelites and the Egyptians, Pharaoh kept thinking he was God and that these are his people. And the whole point of all the plagues, the flies, the frogs, the locusts, the hail, etc., was over and over to get him to realize there is a God even over him that he should be subject to, and that all of us are his people. And so reading the Bible, the Israelite model for government, like you said, we do need government. You're right. wouldn't it be amazing if we had government officials who were in tune to God?
Yes.
And that would make a huge difference, because they would want to play by the rules. They would, more than they would want to gain power or influence or money or perks or whatever. And so back to God and government, I think the best thing I could encourage anyone to do is, if we each turn to God, He knows us, He knows who's in our life, who we have influence over, and we ask every day, okay, God, I want to be a force for good in this nation, to help do my part to heal the nation, to teach the correct principles. What do I do today? And then we wait and listen to the impressions that will come to our souls. And if we do what those impressions are, we will be on God's team, and He will lead and guide and direct each one of us as to what to do, whether it's someone we're going to call, or like Brooke was mentioning, 12 people. And maybe for me, being a single parent, 12 people right now is impossible, but I was at a conference, if you're aware of the Eagle Forum, they invited me to a conference on Saturday, and I was a vendor there, and I was able to help 16 families get copies of the Forgotten American Stories celebrating America's Constitution. I was able to teach them, hey, this is what's not in our textbooks anymore. This is how you can use this as a resource in your family. 27 one-page stories that you can read yourself with you and your husband at night, and then in the morning share them with your kids at the breakfast table or the dinner table or whatever, to teach these principles. I really do believe we have to be converted ourselves. We then share these things with our families, our individual families, and then we spread out to our community, then we spread out through our state, then through the nation, then through the world. These principles are meant to be for the world. Yes.
You mentioned Pharaoh there, and it occurred to me yesterday, thinking along this line, that people who are acquainted with the Bible have a pretty good idea of what a tyrant really is like.
Lots of them.
Yes.
There are lots of tyrants in
Yes.
the Bible.
And but if you're not acquainted with the Scripture and you grow up in this bubble of education that they're giving you with this utopian possibility in the pie in the sky, and you don't know any history to know better.
That's why it's important to teach them then the forgotten stories of America, because most people don't realize we used to have a king, and it was pretty horrific. If you read, most people don't even know those 27 grievances in the Declaration of Independence. If you read the middle of the Declaration of Independence, it lists all the horrible things we were suffering, all the grievances, all the injustices. I mean, can you imagine having your son or daughter, or your husband or your son out fishing in the Atlantic Ocean, and then a British ship comes and captures the ship and makes your husband and your son fight on their side against their own brethren here in America? That was happening, and that's listed in the Declaration of Independence. So many other things, atrocities where they'd try you overseas for some trumped up charge, and or at a place that was so uncomfortable and so distant from the records that might have built up your case. To just wear you out, to finally you'd submit to whatever King George III wanted you to do. There wasn't any representation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just one thing after another.
I would like to be able to say something.
Yes, Judy, welcome.
Thank you. I have We the Kids. I'm the founder of We the Kids. It has been probably 8 years that I've been working at getting the word out. Lydia is one of the instructors, educators for We the Kids. She writes great lessons, everything from the Holocaust to the Mayflower to white history. We the Kids has been under the foundation of Advanced America for the last 5 years. Steve Gronka is the founder of Advanced America. He also has Sequest Kids. Sequest Kids is a boat building program to build a boat in 3 days or less. What I wanted to say is Steve has been here. I'm in Indiana this week, and we've gotten out and started going around setting up Sequest Kids and We the Kids events. We have gotten a lot of support. I live in a very, very democratic, very leftist county, which has been very hard to get anything going. Yes and no. I've been for the last 4 years taking kids into the TV station to interview everyone from politicians to Native Americans to World War II vets. But at any rate, getting back to my point, the point is that we've got out and started presenting to different organizations, kids organizations, Sequest Kids and We the Kids. The response was wonderful. The Kroc Center, Salvation Army, very interested. Heroes Camp, huge kids camp for low-income kids, very interested.
Judy, are you speaking of the effort that you have as it relates to being able to hold back the tide of socialism?
Yeah, most definitely. One of the biggest things that I've seen with going into these groups, getting this started, Steve and I've talked about doing Sequest Kids and We the Kids events, putting the two organizations together for the last 4 years, but this is the first time we've actually tested it. What it does is it gets kids out, gets them active in building their own boat, using their own hands by doing it with adult supervision. The American Legion is very interested in being a part of this. One of the attorneys that's on our board of directors has already made an offer to sponsor and put in money for it. But the thing is that what's happening with Sequest Kids and We the Kids, it gets kids off of their phones, off of their computers, gets them out and shows them what actual work is. The other thing that We the Kids will be bringing into this event is we will be teaching privateering history. I have 2 local pirates that
that's a variety of socialism, one might say, I suppose. Piracy.
Piracy, yes.
Yes.
Depending on how you look at it, yes.
Dustin, you had asked, you couldn't find the raise your hand button. Can I ask what it was you had on mind?
Well, sorry for the cheap, selfish plug, but when you guys were talking about getting together, in person rather than online, and finding ways to combat the tide of socialism, I think the main way to combat that is to, teach about capitalism. And, once people understand the difference between the two, they can actually make an intelligent choice.
Yes.
And the selfish plug, I have a movement called Restore the Intent. Its goal is to get Constitution study groups going in every single county in America. So far, we're up to 54 counties and 23 states that are active. And it's just that. It's getting people
Do we have
together.
one in Northampton County?
Say that
Pardon
again.
me?
Who
Oh,
asked?
I was
the
asking
question?
if we have one in Northampton County.
Do you
In
have
New Hampshire?
New Hampton County in Pennsylvania?
No, Northampton County.
Northampton
Mm-hmm.
in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania.
I could check. I'm not sure if we have any in Pennsylvania yet, but the bottom line is, it's not just Constitution that we teach. I'm in North Dakota, Bismarck, North Dakota.
Okay.
On our website, there's actually an interactive map, and you click on your state, it'll move to a page that lists every county, and it'll tell you which counties have active study groups in them.
So that's restoretheintent.com.
Yeah, restoretheintent.com.
Yeah,
And
Karis?
I go through constitutional curriculum, but I break it up and I do videos about money, videos about capitalism. It's just a way for everybody to get together in person, as you said, and talk face to face.
We have Lydia, Peter, Robine, Dustin, and I all work together, although we all have our own organizations. I've got to answer the door. I'll be right back.
Okay, I was thinking while she's away that the building of a boat and the providing of a skill is certainly essential to a capitalist marketplace. There's a wonderful homeschool group here called in Southeast Pennsylvania called Total Involvement. And each year they take on a different project. They are building a large vessel at Independence Seaport Museum this year. They have built an aircraft at Wings Field north of Philadelphia a couple years ago, and then it flew. So they have some very hands-on matters. Lydia, do you have anything to contribute to this at the moment?
I think anything hands-on, I love what Judy said, anything to get kids off their phones and doing something, especially teaching them a skill. That's fabulous. That's something that they can then contribute to society. And like Brooke was mentioning, when you have something, whether it's money or a skill, then it gives you an opportunity. You then have the opportunity to share it, to give it, or a portion of it. And that's something that ennobles all of us as human beings, to be able to share with others. That brings out the compassion in us. And what a direct contrast from really from socialism.
Dependency.
And self-reliance.
Dependency, yes.
Yeah, to be independent and self-reliant, it puts you in a I believe, a noble state as a human being that God wants us all to be in. That's how we learn and grow the most. And capitalism and the free market system enables that to happen. I mean, think about it. America has probably the United States of America has given so much money and means and support and aid, probably more than any other country in the whole planet, to others. When other countries are in need because they've had disasters or wars or whatever, we're there. Now, if that happened in America, who's going to come to our aid?
Right. Well, I do want to thank each of you. Go ahead, Dustin.
Real quick, there is a study group going in York, Pennsylvania.
York. I know some good folks over in York, Pennsylvania. Okay, I will check that out. As far as tools, I do think that if we can articulate, a lot of people will just say loosely, they just have this vague idea of socialism. And if we can get them to recognize what it is, in fact, is the government ownership and control of the means of production and the distribution, and ultimately to where there's no private ownership of business. And we essentially have this coming around through the court decisions as to who has to do what for who when they're baking a cake or putting together a flower bouquet, etc.
Yeah.
But in so many other ways. And but to articulate what socialism actually is, and is it really caring for people to make dependence out of them? Is it really compassionate to make people dependent? And when you look at where the system has come to fruit, and I saw in your notes, Lydia, before this event, you mentioned the systems in Europe that they claim are socialistic, and yet they are very much functioning on a free market economy, which is providing the means for those social services. And I love what you pointed out, that socialism has never produced the wealth for its own operation. It comes in on the and that those societies that people here, and in fact, the list that you had of countries that are socialistic, I have this right here, and feel free to jump in if you want to as we wrap this up. But you said that Hong Kong and Singapore were top of the list for the Economic Freedom Index, and that the United States ranks 12th. And so here people in America are looking over and say, well, socialism is working very well in Denmark and Finland, and we're pretty close to where they are. And of course, in a smaller country, it may not get as complicated as it did here with, for example, Obamacare, if I may say. But So we're pretty far down the rank as far as socialism is on the economic index. And of course, we know that by looking around. And another thing I want us to remember is, I mean, I had said some time ago at a local public meeting, I said most of my neighbors would be very offended if I were to tell them that they were communists. But when you look at the programs they support and the things they want government to do, local, state, and federal, these are communistic ideas and concepts. And in fact, they're so entrenched that some of you may be aware that it was after Franklin Roosevelt ran for office, the Communist Party along the way quit putting up a candidate because along the way because the Democrat Party had adopted most of their platform, and they had no longer a distinct voice in the marketplace of ideas because the Democrats had assumed their positions. But socialism, without rolling back this tide by one means or another, and that has to be with winning hearts one at a time, and learning the distinctions between them. Anything else to add from anyone? I want to thank all of you for participating. Once again, Lydia, thank you you can find her website at forgottenamericanstories.com. And on her website, you can see all the curriculum criteria of things that could for use in a classroom according to the state standards in Utah, but I'm sure that many could use them whether for private homeschooling or for private school or public school, wherever, whether homeschooling or classroom. And then there is that standard of, let's go back to the Bill of Rights being the civil embodiment of the Ten Commandments. And your right to life is rooted in thou shalt not kill. Your right to property is rooted in thou shalt not steal. And we can't pick and choose. They come as a whole, you know. But the concept of socialism is which is forced charity, is so contrary to the Ten Commandments and to basic biblical principle. But we have a community of people, even in the churches, who are very acquainted with the New Testament and practically totally unacquainted with the Old Testament. And if you just take the New Testament by itself, you will end up with socialism. It takes the two of them together. The Old Testament gives understanding to the New Testament, and the New Testament tells the fulfillment of the Old Testament. But anyone else have anything to add here? I will say, as far as American Liberty Tours goes, that website is not my strong port, but you're welcome.
Is Pete wanting to say something? He keeps raising his hand. I don't know if he's waving at me. Hi, Pete. Or if you're saying, hi, I have something to add.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was disconnected from the Q&A.
I had requested that they silence your microphone because we were hearing an awful lot of your dinner preparation.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I had to get room for tomorrow. But anyway, I can't just say how much I enjoyed. I mean, you guys are great. And who's the lady who read?
I'm sorry, you're not coming through. Do you mind to try that again?
Who's the lady who brought up Leonard Reed?
Myself, Karis Coker.
Hey, Karis. I saw Leonard Reed. I attended a week of seminars at Hillsdale College in 1978, and he was one of the seminar leaders. So in a small setting, maybe 20, 25 people in the room.
He would have been 80.
Wasn't that great?
90 years old. Yeah. He was 90 years old.
When in 85?
In 85. He was born in 1888 and died in 1983, I think.
How about that? So he was about 80. So I saw him in 78.
78.
So he was 90 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. He was. I can't believe he was 90. I mean, the guy was amazing. But anyway, just enjoyed what you guys had to say. Lydia, I finally got to see you because she talks about you all the time. And but just what a great session. And you guys, the one word that we just always have to remember is that socialism is antithetical to freedom, and capitalism allows for two essential things. One is the right of ownership, and the other is the ability, it's upward mobility. It means that anybody can rise, can be born at any level and station. You know, you could be born dirty, you can rise,
Abraham Lincoln spoke a lot to the point of upward mobility that was provided under our form of government and free capitalism.
This is people here.
We're losing you, Pete. I'm sorry. There's a problem with the sound is not coming through clearly.
When people hear what the personal benefit is to them personally, then that's the connection. People always want to hear what it is that's going to benefit them personally. Unfortunately, too many people think what is going to benefit them personally is the free stuff. Was that audible?
How big is the plantation now?
Yeah, the government.
How big is the plantation? Right.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway.
to liberty.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
You can either have the free stuff or you can have the freedom. What would you like?
Yeah, I love that.
Good night,
Anyway, thank you.
Anyone
I
else?
thought it was disconnected. It was a message up there, but just great job, you guys.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thank you, Lydia.
everyone.
Nice to see
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brooke.
Appreciate you,
Thanks,
Lydia and Karis and Dustin. Nice to meet you all. Hi, Judy.
Bye.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Lydia.
Night, night.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night, all.
Take care. Thank you. Hi, Karis.